Welcome to another episode. So, welcome, Brandon Conceicao. I'm glad that I said that right the first time.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me. And yeah, that was perfect. Spot on pronunciation.
Thank God. Um, so, there's a lot of people online that look at truth seeking, as I call it. The issues with how things are being run, etc. Some of the narratives that maybe are incorrect. But you're someone who does all of that, but you also want to make a change. You are trying to build your own political party and make a change in that respect. At the minute, it looks like we're heading towards Agenda 2030. What exactly is Agenda 2030?
Oh, wow. Starting out with the bang. So Agenda 2030, essentially, I think Klaus Schwab summed it up perfectly when he said, and I'm not by any means endorsing Klaus Schwab, but he was the head of the WEF for a while, the World Economic Forum. He said, "You will own nothing and be happy." What does that mean? You will own nothing and be happy. Well, let's just take a look at life right now. Okay. So they are moving everything from a renter's economy, or no, from an ownership economy to a renter's economy. They're making it so impossible for you to be able to afford to buy a home. Back in the day, you bought a home when you were in your 20s. Now people are buying average first time home buyers in their late 30s right now. And the average cost of a home is over $400,000. Okay. So they're making it so that life is incredibly unaffordable. Okay. And that is just the basic level. Agenda 2030 is far darker than that. Okay. So they want to create a world war, essentially. They want to create a third world war where nuclear weapons are used or there's mass destruction, weapons of mass destruction. How do we see this world war unfolding? Well, Albert Pike, a known Freemason, predicted these three world wars back in the 1800s. Before any world war happened, he predicted three. How do you predict three world wars? You don't predict them, you script them. So the people in power, the world bankers, have been funding both sides of every war since they came into power. And so in that situation, it's not a prediction, it's a script. And what we're heading towards is World War III, or what they want is World War III. And World War III is a war fought primarily starting in the Middle East between Israel and its, counterparts, or I wouldn't even say counterparts, Israel and its surrounding nations, right? And they want the devastation. They want all of the countries to get involved. So China's backing Iran, right? Israel's at war with Israel's at war with Iran. The U.S. has to back Israel. So Israel and the U.S. against Iran, China. Not to mention we have Ukraine and Russia. The United States supports Ukraine, right? Russia obviously would be joining forces with its allies, which in turn would be China and Iran. So they want to create a third world war. And in that world war, it would be devastating, like so catastrophic. They would use nuclear weapons. They would make it so that the populations would fall to their knees, essentially. And Bill Cooper summed this up perfectly in the 90s. He had a great interview with CNN where he talked about this would be essentially like an Armageddon type of war where everybody is just so devastated that there's no choice but to unify under a one world government. Okay. And when I say one world government, it's one world government run by the global elite, by the world bankers, by the cabal that's been in power for the last, 3,000 plus years on this planet. And so all we have to do is look at the events that are happening in modern day, where we have Peter Thiel, moving to Argentina outside of the strike zone of, nuclear weapons, all of these elites building $100 million bunkers. Why do you need all of this? What's happening, or what do you know that we don't know that you need these bunkers for? Why are you moving outside the range of missiles? What's happening? Or was it Argentina, or I think it was Venezuela Peter Thiel's moving to? But
Yeah,
either
I think it's
way,
Argentina, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. So either way, like these people know something we don't know, and that's what Agenda 2030 is. They want to create such devastation on this planet that we have no choice but to unify under a one world government, which then becomes a technocratic state. Technocratic state meaning you're completely surveilled, everything's linked to the grid. You're using electric, cars. You have a digital currency, and if you do anything out of line, these flock cameras are watching you. Number one, if you do anything out of line, you're penalized immediately. So, since your bank is tied into the grid, since your currency is tied into the grid, they dock you immediately. If your car is tied into the grid, they say, no, you can't use your car. They just have complete control over everything. And it's just another, step in their enslavement of humanity, just suppressing the human mind, the human consciousness. With that being said, it's never going to happen, in my opinion.
Well, hopefully not. I mean, if we look at the micro level first, as you said, Klaus Schwab, he also said you will eat the bugs because that's the plan for our diet. But if we look at, especially in the US, BlackRock and Vanguard buying up all the properties, and actually we're renting, or the Americans are renting it back to them. And then if we look at population-wise, the population's increased so substantially that if we think about just economics, this is no conspiracy, this is economics. If you have more people in a particular area, the wages will drop because there's more people who are likely to do the job for less money. But what that also does is it inflates the property prices. So the disparity is getting larger and larger and larger between incomes and salaries and wages versus property prices. And then you're priced out in the market, and then these big, companies that have got all of the capital through pension and stock market investment are actually buying up your family home and they're going to rent it back to you. So the Klaus Schwab thing about you will own nothing and be happy seems to be coming true, doesn't it?
Oh, 100%. And the silent killer that nobody realizes is inflation. So the Fed's ability to just endlessly print money. Do you know that our debt surpassed our GDP? Who are we in debt to is the real question. Oh, other governments buy our bonds and whatnot. We owe them. No, we're in debt to the Federal Reserve because the Federal Reserve is not federally owned by the United States. It's not a federal building. It was called the Federal Reserve to create the illusion that it's, of the United States of America. It's not. It's privately owned by the world bankers. They loan the money to the US government. And then, the US government is indebted to them. So it's pretty easy for them to just continually print money and make the value of money worthless. So if we look at the buying power back in the 90s compared to today, it's dramatically decreased. And if you look at the proportion, so everybody's like, well, yes, wages go up too. No, proportionally, it doesn't. The cost of things increasing is not proportional to the increase in wages. So they're doing this silently through inflation. And if you do it over a long enough period of time, it's hard for people to fully grasp and fully see it. But people are waking up now. There's a great show out there called Silo, right? And this is like a whole post-apocalyptic thing where, I think there was a massive war. Spoilers, I don't know exactly what happened, but these people are living in this bunker and outside's devastated. And the people in power say, the only way we're going to get people to fall in line is if we have them forget over time. And the way they have people forget over time is they poison the water.
Fluoride and all that.
Yeah, I think there's a chemical. Exactly. I think there's a chemical we can name that affects the brain's ability to function at its peak. And it's essentially a suppressant. So if you do inflation over time gradually and you use fluoride over time, it makes it so that the world populations can't really keep track of everything. So,
well, it's definitely, from the Fed side of things, as you said, it's a fractional reserve banking system. So the very money that they are lending out is coming from nothing, basically. And then when it's deposited, they can lend out another 90% of that, basically. And then that again, so it's basically in saving people with no real asset. There's nothing even there. It's made out of thin air. And then comes the point that for those people who are whistleblowing, essentially, for want of a better phrase, maybe not quite the right word, but we'll run with it anyway. The reason they are dissented is very much the same as, imagine you've got a child that is 3 years old. And as a parent, you quite like the innocence of the child and the fact that they get excited that a fat man with a beard is going to come down the chimney and give presents. And if you're the uncle who goes round and tells them, look, Santa's not real, you're going to be banned from coming around the house because you are messing with the paradigm that the parents want for the child. And that is the case with the way society works. The paradigm that you are being fed by news, etc., is there to try and enslave your mind, for want of a better term or phrase. That if anyone tries to change that paradigm, changes that programming, they're ostracized and shadow banned, etc., because you are believing in Santa. And unfortunately, Santa does not exist.
Yeah, spot on. Couldn't agree more. Yeah. So, I mean, anybody that tells the truth, especially these scientists. Have you seen the scientists that have all gone missing in recent years that are all talking about, alien life, extraterrestrial life that are just poof type of thing? And look at Charlie Kirk, poof. Look at JFK, doing a video on him. And if you just look at the correlation of events, everybody's like, oh, there's no like absolute smoking gun. Well, why would they hide the files for 60 years for JFK if there's no absolute smoking gun? It's because the devil is in the details. If you have all of the details, you can piece together a narrative that makes sense, So
Do you think Charlie Kirk is the sort of JFK of today in respect of a very public assassination that has got a fall guy, that the evidence has been corrupted and overlaid, literally, with the case of Tarmac and getting rid of the evidence? Do you think there is a commonality there at all?
at first I didn't see it, but the more I've researched what's happened, and I think most people didn't fully understand the extent of what happened to JFK, to be honest. So it was hard to draw a correlation there. But once you were, awakened by what happened to Charlie Kirk, you start looking into more things. And once you see the path that, the path between the two, it becomes so clear. Yeah, Charlie Kirk was JFK'd. And the reason I say that is because, well, JFK did not support the Israeli cause. He did not support the idea that, Israel should be able to have nuclear weapons and keep their program silent while we just test the rest of the world. The whole world, we're saying, listen, you have to report, to the global, I forget what the group is, where you have to register if you're a nuclear power. You have to let people know. The only country that had nuclear weapons that refused to, have that looked into, the Dimona facility, was Israel. And the more he pushed on that, it wasn't very long after, when he was really pushing that he passed away. And so we look at Charlie Kirk. He left the Israeli cause. He woke up. I genuinely think Charlie Kirk just lived most of his life unaware of the influence Israel had on the United States and of the parasite that it's become. And I think that he got into politics with good intentions, extremely intellectual, extremely intelligent, very charismatic, super likable guy, just so likable. I didn't even agree with most of his stances, but he was just a charismatic guy. He seemed like what I would call a good person. Now, do I agree with the views he had? Not all the views he had, definitely not, but he was just so charismatic, and there's no denying that he was, a likable person. And then you could see like the evolution of Charlie waking up to Israel's influence on the United States, because of his friends, like probably like Candace Owens in his ear, continually telling her to wake up. I mean, we even saw her waking up on the internet, over time. She was pro Israel. And then she realized, oh, wow, like there's a lot more to this. And then, of course, right when Charlie Kirk fully wakes up, or I wouldn't say fully wakes up, but right when he really starts to change his tune, because they wanted him to be that guy that just stayed in line, and then he was probably eventually going to become president of the United States. So if he wasn't supporting Israel, that's a huge problem. He had such influence on people. So it made sense for them to kind of suppress him like that.
So you think it's at that level with regards to Israel, etc., rather than the conversations he was having. So, for example, for me, the main sort of areas that he used to debate on were obviously abortion, gender, the left wing rhetoric, for example. That was the majority of his religion, of course, as well. Morality in that respect. They were his core sort of
Yep.
arguments with students, etc. So, you don't think it's the fact that he was, again, removing some of that leftist programming? You think that it's on a much bigger scale than that? Again, akin to the JFK scenario.
Think about how long he spoke about all those topics you just discussed. He spoke his whole career about those topics, and there was never a problem. But the second he says, "Oh, I'm leaving the pro-Israel cause," it's over. It's over for him, which it's tragic. But at the same time, I think there's been three core events in the past, 6 years in the United States that has led to the awakening of the American people, and not just of the American people, but of the globe. One, 2020, COVID, people had time to think and realize what was happening. Second one, Israel attacking Palestine and committing a genocide over there. And then the third one, unfortunately, but not surprisingly, woke up the people, was the assassination of Charlie Kirk. I think those are the three greatest awakenings that have happened in the last 6 years in the United States. And it's tragic that it came at the cost of Charlie's life, obviously. I think he could have woken up the people just by speaking, but that level of devastation, I remember the day I saw the video. I remember, I was sitting at this desk and I just remember chills to my core, absolute chills to my core. So I think it woke up a lot of people and made people ask more questions, which in turn is a good thing, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the whole David Icke totalitarian tiptoe seems to have sort of widened, if that makes sense. So obviously the steps, usually quite small, and the fact that they're so small means that we don't realise for X number of months, X number of years, etc. But it seems like the steps, maybe they're not bigger, but more people are realizing the space between the steps, if that makes sense now, and thinking, actually, hang on a minute, just because that happened doesn't mean to say that more of our rights and freedom of speech. And that's a big thing in the UK at the minute, obviously, which you're probably aware of as well. So I think people are seeing this tiptoe turning into a walk towards the finish line. As you said, maybe it is the war in the Middle East that is the ultimate end goal. Who knows? But there does seem to be a push for some sort of finish line, I feel.
Definitely. I mean, in the race that's happening is the race between Agenda 2030, which is the Great Reset, as they call it, and the Great Awakening. So it's a matter of, are the masses going to wake up before the Great Reset happens? And in my opinion, I can't go on social media without seeing people waking up every single day. I just look at my DMs where it's like people are mind blown by the content that I'm sharing, and they're like, I can't believe, this is true, but at least they're seeing it.
Does AI and Palantir and all of these sorts of things though not have or does not throw a spanner in the works in some respects? Because I was saying this earlier to Sean, that if we look at revolts in the past and the any coups or overthrowing governments, etc., it happened through force, i.e., a secret group in the background managed a few things and basically overthrew the king or whoever was in charge or whatever it may be. Unfortunately, now with the level of monitoring and control, it seems more or less likely now than it's ever been in terms of, well, we know where you're going, we know who you spoke to, we know your network, we know where you're traveling, we know the sorts of things that you follow, obviously Palantir and things like that, we know everything about you essentially. So do you think that it is more difficult now to actually create change? Obviously the political parties and democracy is a fugazi, a ruse in a lot of ways also. So it's a difficult one, isn't it?
I honestly think that most people don't realize how incredibly powerful they are. And there's a reason for that. It's because we have been taught our whole lives to be disempowered. If we go and watch the media, if we go and listen to the music, if we go and listen to, or if we eat the food that we're eating, constantly we're being fed examples of disempowerment. We're not being fed examples of, you are supreme, like not supreme. You have a divine intelligence within you that is so far beyond what even scientists can even comprehend, right? If you just think about the human body, I use AI a lot, right? So I use Claude a lot to do a lot of my work. And when I'm working with Claude, I'm like, wow, this is incredible how intelligent this thing is, how it's making connections, how it's doing all of this. And then I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, wow, the human brain is just so far beyond this, though. It's so much more intelligent. And it's like it makes you realize how intelligent you are when you're using tools like this. But you have to have that space to be able to, sit back, reflect, take a deep breath, and be like, wow, I am intelligent too, or this system is incredibly powerful as well. The elites use poison, they use fluoride, they use the media, they use, all these terrible songs you hear coming out of Hollywood because the frequency suppresses you. They want you completely suppressed. Why would they be so afraid if you weren't suppressed? What would happen? That's what they're afraid of, is you realizing your own true power. So I don't think a revolt is going to come from us taking arms, storming the Capitol like, whatever happened with Trump's people. I think the real revolt or the real war is happening right here. It's a war for your consciousness. It's a war for your attention. It's a war for your own thinking. And if we can change our thinking, we can change the world. It's simple as that. I think if you go into any, elite circle, everybody's woo woo. And what do I mean by woo woo? Oh, it's so out there. If you look at the manifesting people, if you look at that, people are like, oh, that's just so out there. But the reality is we create our own reality. Whatever we visualize is what happens. And it happens on an individual level, and then it can expand and affect the people around us. So there'd be no reason why they need to hijack our visualization 24/7, why they need to predict wars. There'd be no reason for all of this if they didn't realize how intelligent we were. So they hijack our visualization so we can create that chaos in the world for them. They don't have the power to create this chaos on their own. They have to create the illusion of chaos, and then we amplify it by buying into it, by believing it. So all we have to do is change our thinking, and we have to change the way we see the world, which is why I created the American Congress Party. I want people to see the idea of free food without poison in it for the American people, free education, and I mean beyond just standard education. I want real knowledge being shared, like what I just shared here. And free college, there should be no reason you should be going 100,000 into debt the second you leave and, are about to start in the world. There's no reason for that. And then free healthcare in this country. Those are three pillars that we should be able to have in the United States, and then we should be able to reverberate that around the world. There's no reason why our government can't provide us these things if they can, create wars around the world type of thing. So I think the American people and the people of the globe need to start to visualize what they want to see in the world rather than what the elites want you to see.
100%. And AI, we all know AI can be thick because we're there saying, no, I didn't mean that. Okay, let me try again. Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't do it correct. So yeah, AI is not as smart as we think it is. And then your other points on priming. We are primed to, I saw that 4 years ago. Also, you're already accustomed to the fact that that's going to come in, and you accept it. And maybe it is about perception. They did change the hertz from 432 to 440 with music in the past. Again, question why did that happen? Woo woo. People say things are woo woo, but if we look at quantum physics, which is the base of all existence, that's the most woo woo shit you've ever seen in your life. Observation of a photon or a particle changes as you observe it. That's the most woo woo shit you've ever heard. And that's the building blocks of society. So there is more to, and I don't want to go into a whole epistemological issue with science, but science is only true up until a point. Things that were true 100 years ago have now been disproven. So is there not a chance that the very things that we think today are incorrect? But we're so arrogant in how we look at things. And science is such a broad thing. There's scientists that disagreed with COVID, but we went with Fauci, who clearly was lying through his teeth, which we've now seen. So people change their tact. But
Yeah,
sometimes it's too late. It's too late. You've already made decisions based on that information that are unfortunately irreversible.
that's true. And that's the consequences of being unconscious. If you're huh, in 2019, I did a bunch I was really waking up to the food industry, the healthcare industry, all these things. And I learned about jabs a lot. And I went around telling everybody, like, they're poisoning us. I was trying to tell my family. I mean, I was in tears trying to plead to my family, like, you don't realize it, but they're really doing this stuff to us. Like, and everybody at that time was like, dude, what? The government would never allow that. The FDA would never allow that. And here I am trying to explain to people, like, no, they do. Like, there is a conspiracy to harm you. There is a conspiracy to, suppress you. And so before 2020, if you were talking like that, you were absolutely insane. And then 2020 happened. And I think a huge chunk of people woke up, they're like, wow, you're just going to rush this thing through and we're not even going to like have proper testing, all this stuff. I'm not getting that. There was a large group of people because of the media campaign, again, predictive programming and just feeding you stuff through the TV, who you're seeing most of. Think about it. If some of these alternate scientists were on the TV, do you think people would have gotten the injection? No, they wouldn't have. But that's not who they feed you. They feed you Fauci, right? They give you all these jingles and all this nonsense, and they pay all these people to go on social media to promote it. And it's because they're hijacking your visualization. That's how they get you to do things. And that's how they get the mass societal effect. They want that mass energy. Societal pressure, I think, is the biggest killer of dreams in the entire world because they want you to be uniform and fall in line and do all of these things. So yeah, I think after 2020 people just started questioning everything.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, even the word or phrase conspiracy theory was a CIA creation to discourage you from um, uh, having credibility, essentially. And the way that you
Yeah,
use words does have an impact on how you think about things. So, for example, social distancing. How is distancing social in any way, shape, or form? The very phrase makes it seem better. Oh,
yeah,
pro-choice. Oh, so you mean actually pro killing babies? That's they don't say it in that way. Oh, we had to displace members of a certain area through through military means. So basically, you bombed and killed people, so they had to
yeah,
move. So again, it's the way the phrase and terminology that you use can make it softer in order to so you don't really see exactly what's happening, if that makes sense. And then
yeah,
in terms of mind control, etc., and people think that it might not exist, just look up MK Ultra. That's well documented. And actually, do you think that doesn't still go on? Maybe it's just hidden better. You don't know. DARPA, obviously, the internet was created by DARPA, and instead of forcing people to give up all their information, it was made voluntary instead. So there's so
yeah,
much really about how things work in reality that people aren't necessarily aware of. And look, I'm not saying I know everything either. It's a learning thing. I'm more than happy to accept that I could be wrong with anything. But the point is to seek truth and not be tied to dogma or cognitive bias to say, well, no, I'm gonna die on this hill. It's not true.
yeah. 100% agree. And you know what? I actually, to that point, I really admire Charlie for that the most, is because he was given information that was contradictory to what he believed for so long. And with that information, he actually changed his mind and realized he researched and changed his mind. And I appreciate that. And that needs to happen on a global scale because we've all been given the wrong information. And as the new information comes out, we have to be able to accept it. And for the older generations, that's going to be really hard. If you look at the older generations, they're the ones that have been the most conditioned. They're the ones that have received the most, um, the
Programming.
most fluoride, I guess, over time, right? They have a lot to work through versus the younger generations. You know, you're a fresh soul on this planet. It's easier to, accept new ideas and whatnot. And as the truth comes to people, the hardest part is going to be accepting it. And I think, there's three real ways they control people on this planet, like the three centers, the triangle, if you will. It's money, it's military, and it's finance. No, not finance, religion. So if you look into the three places on this planet where they're not considered a part of any country, they're their own country, they
Yeah.
have their own constitution, it would be Washington, D.C.,
Yeah.
which is the military arm of the world. It would be the inner state of London,
Inner city
which
London. Yeah.
is the financial capital of the world, which has all the Rothschilds gold and whatnot. And then it's the Vatican. And
That's it.
they're all connected. That's how they control the world, is through that triangle right there. And for them to have their own laws and their own rules and their own way, think about how easy it would be to launder money, to control, to do all of these things when there is no laws contradictory to it. And people just accept, oh, Washington, D.C. has its own, it's its own thing. That's the government that completely controls the United States of America and its own thing. How is that allowed? How does that make any
It's
sense?
the world police, though, isn't it? America, as you said, Washington D.C., the City of London, and the Vatican have their own arms of this wider network, as it were. But even if you look at the wars or the perpetual war, and you're on about this end war, but even if you look at the wars that have happened over the last 15, 20 years, and the countries on the list are those that don't have centralized banking.
Yep, 9 countries stated in the early 2000s, right? All of them had one thing in common. They didn't have a Rothschild owned central bank. Libya is one of them. Afghanistan was one of them. Iran's one of them. What was it? Argentina was another one of
No,
them.
it was Venezuela, Syria, Cuba.
Venezuela. Yep.
Venezuela was
And
recent, wasn't it? So
yeah, look at all the wars that have happened in the last 20 years or 26 years. Look at the countries that were targeted, and it's pretty obvious. It's so obvious, actually. If you look into Gaddafi at all, what he was doing, it makes it so. It's an African country. Okay, we're raised to believe that Africa is just so far behind the rest of the world, right? It's a third world country. Their resources are limited. But if you look at what Gaddafi was doing with Libya, he was literally turning a desert into farmland. He was creating, I think it was the eighth world wonder, where he was creating a river that would turn the Sahara green, essentially. And not only that, he was giving his people, his government or his dictatorship was able to afford for its people free healthcare, free education, electricity was I think free or stipend or whatever. And if they didn't have the education you wanted in their country, they paid for you to go internationally, right? They would give farmers land to be able to farm, and they provide them with the seeds and the animals. Okay. And not to mention, they were backing out of the global currency system. They were creating their own currency backed by gold, which actually means something rather than just endless paper and fractional reserve banking that comes, creates money out of thin air. It was backed by gold. Guess what? Within 2 weeks of Hillary Clinton finding out about this, bombs started dropping on Libya. And yes, Gaddafi probably had his flaws for sure. Definitely. Was he a perfect man? By no means. But you just have to look at what he was able to do with his country with limited resources. Look what he was able to do. He was able to create an incredible system, and he did it with limited resources. And that's why the United States went in there, bombed them, because if anybody in the United States realized what an African country was able to do, they would demand so much more from their government. But before people could really find out about it, before Libya could really take off, they bombed it. And now look at it. They sell humans on the open market in Libya now. And if you go and look at the buildings and the architecture, it's completely devastated compared to when Gaddafi was in power.
it's the gold standard. Obviously, in 1971, I believe it was, President Nixon took it off the gold standard, and obviously since then, if you look at graphs, inflation, the financial situation has obviously gone into dire straits. And then you talked about farming. Monsanto, I believe, have GMO'd most seeds, and there's now obviously seedless fruits now with terminator cells that don't regerminate. So you are compelled to continue to buy these seeds, which over time cause the soil to become sort of
Dead.
unfertilized, if that makes sense, not natural in that
Yeah.
respect. So it seems like there is a sort of ploy to hijack the natural process and try and monetize it. Which leads to the chemtrails as well. I mean, what are your thoughts on the chemtrail situation? What do you think that they're trying to, or what's the outcome of those? Is it to block the sun? Is it to actually heat the earth, to act as a shield to keep the heat in, and then blame climate change? Is it to kill plants? Is it to kill bees? There's so many potential. Is it just so we breathe in metals? There's so many potential things that it could be that it's a weird one. And to the people who say it's just contrails, I said this to a friend. I said, "How come today there's nothing? There's none in the sky?" I said, "So you're telling me there's no flights today at all? Like at normal airplanes, there's no flights today? Doesn't make sense."
Yeah. Yeah. And you really can't convince people that aren't already kind of waking up of stuff like this. But I think chemtrails, all of those things you just said were their intention. And it's really a way of reaching people that they can't reach as well. So if you're able to purify your food, I mean, grow your own food, purify your water, if you're able to do all of these things right in your own individual life, they have to poison the air because that's the only way they can get you. If you're doing everything right, you could literally live off grid somewhere, do all these things right. So they have to dump it into the atmosphere so that it reaches you somehow. They want to affect you in the most ways possible, but at least in the minimum ways possible as well.
Who was that guy that got arrested in the States that was essentially self sufficient? He was growing his own veg and stuff, but it was the rainwater that he was collecting
Yeah,
that
it's illegal.
yeah, but how I don't understand, how can rainwater be illegal? Like it doesn't make any sense. It makes zero sense. The fact that it's coming down from the clouds, landing on your property, which it feeds the plants, the water, and obviously it goes down gutters and goes back into the system. But the fact that you're creating water on your own premises and you're not allowed to
Yeah.
baffles me more than probably anything else. Above all else, what falls from the sky you cannot keep. Like we
Yeah.
we have water bots and stuff in the UK, which is fine. To water the plants and stuff, we have these big jugs, or we can have them in the garden and stuff. But in the States, is it a state by state basis? Then is it, as with most rules in the
Maybe
US?
there's a few states, but for the most part, I know it's not legal to collect rainwater. And it's because it's probably better water than anything they could serve you. So
It's like
I think
have you got dogs, or have you ever had dogs?
dogs, no,
Yeah.
no, no.
So the dogs, for example, I could pour water out of the tap into the bucket for them, and they'll have it. Don't get me wrong, but if there's a puddle, if there's a river, if there's any water even in a plant pot, which one are they going to first?
Right. Exactly. And
A
you know what?
100 times out of 100.
Speaking to that, I forget the doctor's name, but he did that experiment on water, right? To see if, water was intelligent or whatever. And if you spoke
Yeah, it was
nicely
it
to
was a
water,
moto, wasn't it? It was a Japanese guy called a
yes,
moto.
yes. So he did that water experiment where if you spoke nicely to water, the crystals, when you froze it, were just absolute masterpieces. But if you spoke negatively to water, the crystal structure was just ugly. It was destroyed. It was bad. And then guess what? If you do that on a mass scale by poisoning the water, you change the crystal structure of that water. And then that water goes into you. And what? We're like 70, 80% water. So our entire structures are just misaligned with how it's supposed to be in natural law. And I had this experience with I went to India and I was studying there under my mentor, my teacher, my guru, whatever you want to call it. And he took me to this spring, and this water is coming up deep from underground, deep, deep from underground. And I swear to you, the closer I got to this water, the more pulled to it I felt. And I remember touching, like just putting my toe into this water source, and my whole body just illuminated. It just felt like my cells were jumping for joy. And then you can drink from this directly because it's a spring, it's coming straight from the ground. And you drink it and it just feels like every cell in your body is just rejuvenated and you're just ecstatic and energized. And all I could think to myself was, wow, I just wish that this was every piece of water I drank for the rest of my life. I wish that this was every person's experience. I wish everyone could have this. And that's when he told me, he's like, we're going to make this happen for the whole world. And I'm just like, okay, all right, sounds good. This was back in 2019, 2020. And, that's what led to the creation of the American Congress Party and all these things. But on the water level, nature is really the source of so many amazing things. Natural essence of nature is to just align you with who you are and to provide for you and to just continually give to you despite all of the elite's contradictory tactics. And they want to inverse everything. That's their goal. They want everything inversed. So if it's natural to go drink from the spring or to take the water from the rain, they want you doing the exact opposite. That way you're not in tune with yourself. That way you're not in tune with nature. And that way you never wake up.
It's one of the reasons why everyone's B12 deficient, or well, especially vegetarians and obviously even meat eaters as well, is that the if in the past the algae that was at the bottom on all of the moss and the shrubbery that was at the bottom of the rivers, that would
Yep.
provide the B12 that you would get from the water naturally. Now obviously
Wow.
animals that we eat get that from that source because they are eating and drinking from those sources, which is why we get it from those animals. But actually, if we were to drink more of that natural water, we would have the B12 from that rather than tap water, essentially. And then it comes to the meat side of things as well. Oh, this is what I was going to say actually on that as well, the mountain thing. So I've drank water from the mountains, like it's fresh, it's beautiful, it's come straight off the top of the mountain. And my friend's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "It's mountain water." And he said, "Well, oh, is it clean?" It's like, mate, the bottle that you've got is from here, the Highland Spring. They've put it into a bottle and they've taken it, and you've gone to buy the bottle. Why don't I just take it from the source? First of all, and shows how brainwashed people are. It's a bit like the spring you mentioned. It's like someone saying, "Oh, I'm not going to drink it from the spring." Someone's put a bottle of water and collected it, put it in the shop, and they say, "Oh, that sounds cool. Let me buy that." So that's
Yeah.
that's the weird one. And then obviously water's one side, but what about the meat side? There's talks now, especially from people like Bill Gates, that it's going to be lab grown meat. And you're going to love it, and it's going to be with meat glue, and steaks are going to be fake, chicken's going to be fake, and that's what you're going to be eating because you peasants don't deserve real meat.
Yep. Yep. There's
But
a movie. Go on,
no,
sorry.
I was going to say, is that the first stage towards the eating of the bugs? It starts there.
So yeah, I think I forget the movie back in, I think it was in like this 50s or 60s. It was called Green something, and it just it showed people in the future. It was like about some year in the future where people were eating bugs. And it's like these protein packs that are all just like maggots or whatever. And so on the meat factor, I mean, we had huge breaking news in the United States. I don't know if you saw this, where we just imported a massive amount of meat from a foreign country, beef. They're claiming it's beef, right? From a foreign country to try to lower beef costs in the United States. Trump won't say where it came from. He won't say, why he's doing this other than, oh, I'm lowering costs for the everyday Americans. It's like, well, might want to avoid beef for the next few months because who knows where it's coming from. Meanwhile, in the United States, they're rounding up wild Mustangs, wild horses, right? And they're selling them to slaughterhouses in foreign countries. So it's almost suspicious the fact that they're rounding up these horses and then selling them to foreign countries, and then we're getting some form of meat back in the United States that's from an unconfirmed source, when I'm pretty sure the United States is one of the largest producers of their own meat. So he's undercutting the farmers in the United States. I mean, the ranchers in the United States. On top of it, rounding up these wild Mustangs, which are a sacred animal, which is sacred to the land, which are supposed to be protected, and then bringing in a meat source from an unknown country and calling it beef. So I personally have been vegetarian since probably since I was like 20, 21 years old. And I'm a huge animal lover. I love animals like to my core type of thing. But even on like a higher level, I remember reading a book about the coding of animals and how the coding of animals, or like the animal emotions, all of that stuff gets passed to whoever consumes it. So, for example, if an animal is in a massive state of fear prior to its death, which its cortisol spikes through the roof right before it's killed, because it can anticipate it, it knows it, it understands it. That passes into the meat, and then that meat is then consumed by us. That means that's going to impact me on a health level, on a fear level, and just beyond that. So I remember reading this when I was very young, and how long it takes for meat to digest and pass through the system and whatnot. And I'm like, you know what? Let's give vegetarian a try. And I was a bodybuilder at the time. I loved, I wanted my protein. And I gave it a try. And you know what? I felt better. And I didn't feel any like malnourishment or anything like that. And in fact, I haven't noticed anything of the sorts like that. So I just stuck with the whole vegetarian outlook. But I think it would benefit the American people for the next, at least for the next few months, to avoid buying beef from untrusted sources, because we don't know what we are getting.
It seems like society has, in the past, it's always been about, or always been about rather, getting better, getting more intelligent, having better societies, etc., 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 dressing better, building better cathedrals. Even, the drain pipes used to be so beautiful, and the benches, and it seems like we're kind of going the other way. Let's make things as shit as possible. The building's horrible, low cost, poor
Yeah.
materials. Let's not use this brick. Let's use, this plastic fake wood because it's cheaper. And okay, let's
Yeah.
say, for example, in our life, for example, do you know what? Sometimes you do go for a cheap meal. Sometimes you do go for a cheap piece of clothing. Sometimes you do go for the cheap vehicle. And that's a decision you make on an individual basis. But the problem is, if you do that throughout your whole life, and you always take the cheap, the worst option, your whole life is just going to be cheap. You're never going to have the best beer. You're never going to have the best food. You're never going to have the best car. You're never going to have anything, and it's just going to be mundane. And that's how I feel like society's gone. It would have been okay, have really good, like, beautiful buildings, and then one off. Do you know what? We don't really need a great design for that, so let's just do it cheap on that occasion. But we've seen to have done that across the board now, which, again, maybe on a conscience basis, makes you less joyous. If you see a lovely building and, working on or walking on rather old cobbled streets, and you see even cars, there used to be loads of different colours of cars in every car park. Now it's all grey, black, white. Do you think there is something in that to sort of dull the senses and make it that we don't see potential and beauty in everything?
100%. Like spot on. Everything you just said, absolutely spot on. And it's funny because there's like a elite knowledge that runs in the elite circles that, all of these people that are mega wealthy just know intrinsically. They're raised that way, they're born that way, they're taught that way, probably drinking out of copper water bottles as well. Making sure that, yeah, I saw that, making sure their water's energized, everything like that. So this knowledge comes down to the quantum level. Okay. And what I mean by quantum is everything's atomic, right? And even beyond that, there's quantum. Like you can, if you look at the movie, what is that? Ant-Man quantum universe. Like if you just keep shrinking, there's just more and more life that just appears the smaller you go, type of thing. And so everybody is comprised of these quantums. Okay. So the way the elites have set this planet up is that the normal common man gets the lower of the quantums. Okay. But if you go into an elite person's home, they have a $2 million painting on the wall, right? Their house is made of brick, of stone. In the United States, it's a huge debate right now. Um, all the houses are being built from wood, which shouldn't be as big a problem if the wood was actually solid. If you look at the wood that they were using to build a house like 100 years ago in the United States, you can count the rings on that 2x4 of how old and strong that wood is. But now you look at it, it's probably, 300-year-old wood back then, but now it's probably like, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 at the most year-old wood that they're using to build these houses. And the 2x4s aren't even consistent. Some of them are a lot smaller than what they used to be. So they're building these houses in the United States that are, just essentially can be blown away in the wind. But the elites never, ever, ever use this for themselves. And the only time they would use this stuff for themselves is if they felt like it, out of freedom of choice. It's not for the common man, it's not freedom of choice, it's freedom of survival. It's survival at this point. They can only afford these things. So what the elites know is that the higher you raise your energies, the more wealth comes to them. Okay. So that's why they go to the nice places. They travel in the nice cars. They wear the nice clothing. It's because they change their quantums to attract wealth. They don't want people to know, the common man to know, that if you change your quantums, if you just slightly elevate your energies, that you could break free from this whole survival mindset. And so while we're going to school in the education system set up by the Rockefellers, where we're being told what to do, how to do, right? And Rockefeller himself said this, I don't want a nation of thinkers. I want a nation of workers. We're being taught how to work for these people. We're being taught how to be slaves to these people. But the real free thinkers that actually end up breaking free and take risk in life, they realize that the elites don't do anything of what they teach us in the education system. They do the exact opposite. They do the exact opposite. So when it comes to buying the nice thing, they don't worry about stuff like that. And it's not even if they had no money. So if they were to go broke today, let's say one of these people goes broke today, they have knowledge to become wealthy again. So if they had no money in their bank, they would still go to the nice places. They would just sit there. So I think there was a book that came out called Think and Grow Rich, and I think it was
Napoleon
Napoleon
Hill.
Hill.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have it right behind me here. He was talking about Andrew Carnegie, maybe.
Yeah, it was
Maybe
Andrew
it was Andrew.
Carnegie. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and so I think it was Andrew Carnegie. He would go. He had no money, right? He had zero money. He would go into these bars or these really nice places and just sit next to the rich people. He wouldn't get anything. He would just get water, right? And he would just sit next to these wealthy people to get that quantum energy, to grab that energy, to feel what it's like to be next to these people. And I think that the common man needs to be given this knowledge on how to elevate themselves, not just on a wealth level, but on a whole entire vibration level. Because right now, the common man is vibrating at a very, very, very low frequency compared to what their potential is. Everybody's scared, everybody's in fear, everybody's in stress. And the elites count on you staying in stress. So that way you stay slaves to them. Because if you're afraid, you're never going to take that risk. If you're stressed out about paying your bills and you're worried about all this, you're never going to take that risk. So if any of the listeners are attuned to this, my suggestion to you: go to a 5-star hotel. You don't have to stay there. Go up to the bar, get a club soda or get a coffee, and just sit there and bask in that energy. Do that every week for the next 6 months and see how your life has changed over those 6 months. That's just one small tweak you can make that the elites all know that they don't want you to know about.
It's definitely a case of environment and also mentality, isn't it? The abundance mindset versus scarcity mindset. If you're always worried about bills, which everyone has bills, then you're always going to be worried about bills. Even if you're a millionaire, you're going to have even more worries. And if you live your life in that worry state, you're going to always be worried. So what's the point in worrying? Does it, you're worried, does it affect how, or does it affect the outcome? No, it just puts you in a stressed state. As the Stoic said, I think it was Seneca, says, he who suffers before it's necessary suffers more than necessary. It's like if
Yep.
you're worried about your dog dying in 3 years' time, 4 years' time, and you live that every day, you've taken an event that could last 2 months, obviously after the mourning of your dog, and you've added 3 years to it.
Yep. Look at
What?
the
So go on.
yeah. Look at the greatest minds that have ever come to this planet. They tell you, don't worry about tomorrow. Don't worry about yesterday. Live in the present moment. And as a human race, we're not able to do that right now. They've created the system in such a way where we are in a constant state of fear, stress, worry, concern. And what happens is what you think is what becomes your reality. What you think on a day-to-day basis is quite literally what becomes your reality. And there's plenty of science to back this up. There's plenty of science. So if you're saying, "Oh, this is craziness. This is so far out there." No, it is not. That's why when Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is within you, the kingdom of God is within you, it means you have the capability to create. You have the ability to create. I think the greatest secret on this planet that the elites have kept for themselves is that we all are one with the supreme source and that we have the same ability to create the reality we want than anybody else on this planet. Nobody's special. There is no supreme person on this planet. Okay? Even when Jesus came here, even when Buddha came here, they never said, I'm the supreme being. You have to follow me. When Krishna came here, he never said, I am supreme. I'm better than all of you. You have to follow me. They just shared their knowledge. And their knowledge is what really the elites follow. And that's why they change the books. That's why they make some of these characters out to be people that they're not, right? That's why they have to do it, because if you had this knowledge, if you felt empowered, if you felt like you were the creator of your own life, then how can they manipulate you?
Of course, and I love what you said about the time thing. I always think of Aristotle's explanation of time. If you think of time as a linear timeline, as we do, and funnily enough, just a side topic, you know how we think of time as left to right, east to west.
Yeah. Yep.
In China, they think of time as north and south,
Interesting.
which
Up
is
and
which is
down.
strange, yeah. And maybe because of how
Yeah.
they write, I don't know. But on that, just on the Aristotle thing, if you think of time as time on a timeline, the past is infinite. It goes back for as long as human history. The future is also infinite. So it's this massive block either side. Time is like the width of a hair. The present moment is like the width of a hair. So in reality, if that's all of time and that's the width of a hair is the present moment, time doesn't even exist. Because if on the grand scale
Exactly.
of thing, it's the reciprocal of infinity. So time doesn't exist. So then why are you worried about shit? Why are you worried about anything? The future doesn't exist, the past doesn't exist, and the present doesn't exist. Just experience. Worry is
Yep.
the
I
absence of joy, or the thief of joy. I think the phrase
joy.
is.
Thief
So
of joy.
so so why
Yeah.
why are you worried about that? It doesn't make any sense. And then the other thing you mentioned is about the books. One of the scariest things as part of all of this is the anthropic situation. You mentioned Claude earlier. They are
Yeah.
they are uploading books and
Yep.
destroying them, which means that AI will have all of the information, feed you what it wants, and it will also know who's asked what. It knows. Oh, I've given this guy. Oh, damn, he's asking about all these books. Right, that's he knows a bit too much. So I think it's a really scary situation with regards to what's happened to Anthropic. Look, I'm not saying. I mean, there could be a positive that a book that's only got one left, they upload it and then they can now print loads of them. But I don't think that's what's going to happen.
I mean, all we have to do is look at McGraw Hill, owned by Ghislaine Maxwell's father, right, who is a known Mossad asset. Those are the textbooks that every student in the United States studies. So it's they're not doing it for the intentions of giving this knowledge out to the people. But I will say this, okay? Everything we've said so far on this podcast has been kind of grim. I'm not going to lie. And it's funny because people who watch my videos, they're like, "How are you so happy?" They comment this like, or they'll send me a message like, "Why are you happy?" Like it doesn't make sense. The topic you're talking about doesn't, like, you shouldn't be happy. And it's because I carry with me an internal sense of knowing that this is never going to work for the elites. You cannot suppress human consciousness. You can suppress it to an extent, but you can't eradicate it the way they're trying to. And the way I see, the transformation from 2020 to now, I just know they're going to lose. I know for a fact that they're going to lose. If you were to ask me if the Great Reset was going to win over the Great Awakening, I'd laugh. There's just an internal confidence that I know that no matter what, they're never going to win because you can't suppress human consciousness. More than that, you can't suppress nature. Okay, so everybody loves to pray to a god in the sky, right? They love to say, oh, Jesus is going to descend upon this planet and Krishna is going to, or Kalki Avatar is going to, I don't know if you know about Dash Avatar in Hinduism, but essentially it's the supreme taking the supreme source of all things taking birth as a human on this planet. And they all think, oh, they're gonna descend on a white horse from these clouds from the sky, right? Everybody loves to pray to an invisible God. Everybody loves to do that. But what they don't realize is the God that's beneath their feet and the God that's around them 24/7. And that's Mother Nature. People don't realize the universe, Mother Nature, it is the supreme intelligence on this planet. It is without a doubt on this planet and beyond, obviously, Mother Universe, right? If you were to just connect with nature more, if you were to just connect with the universe more, you'd realize that, oh, this food that I'm picking up off the ground is going to become my body through some divine intelligence. I'm not the one creating this, like taking this food which was created by nature, putting it into my body and it becomes my body. Like when you put a piece of food in your mouth, you're not thinking, oh, this is going to become a piece of my arm at some point. There's nothing telling you that. Like this whole body that we have, right? It's come from nature. It's incredible. Like just absolutely mind-boggling that nature knows that if I'm going to drink this water or pick up this piece of food, it knows exactly how to use it, where to put it, when to put it, and for this system to keep flowing. So I urge people to become more connected with nature. I think the Native Americans in the United States knew about this, which is why they took them out, which is why they had to, get rid of all of the Native Americans in the United States, because they were very, very, very connected with the land. And I'm not saying that Jesus didn't come here and he wasn't, the son of God or whatever, or Krishna didn't come here and he wasn't one with the supreme. I'm saying that when they did come here, they taught you how to connect with nature. They taught you that nature is going to guide you. And that's why they have to poison all of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there, and I had to write a few things down because I think there's a few topics or things that I want to touch on there. The first is the happiness side. The whole Viktor Frankl man's search for meaning. You can be happy in a real bad situation, and actually, I don't know where I heard this, but evil prevails until the time that good wins, because apparently if you look at those as sort of separate entities or power structures, as it were, evil can be winning, but because good is so powerful, it's like the rock to the paper. The paper's always going to beat the rock in the end. So that's why you can be optimistic. Even if you know how bad things are, you're realist. You are aware of things. It doesn't mean to say that you don't have some sort of faith or optimism that things will work out in the end. And then you mentioned God as well, because I'm so number one in terms of actual standard religion, if that makes sense. And you mentioned nature. Why would God? And this is just my own thoughts, so please don't get offended. This is just a discussion, isn't it? Essentially, why would God want you to pray X number of times a day? Because as a God, surely He wouldn't want You know, it wouldn't have to be a forced thing. Why would he want you to recite certain phrases? Surely, like a girlfriend know this, they don't want to have to tell you to buy them flowers. They want you to want to buy flowers. So you should
Yeah.
want to say certain things, not be forced to. And then, why are you begging? Why are you asking? Oh, please give me this, let me win the lottery. That's not how it works. It's like a parent. You don't beg, oh, give me sweets. No, you want to have challenges that are going to mold you into the man that you want to become, or woman that you want to become. Nature-wise, so I would probably say my views are closest to panendeism, which basically means that God is nature, essentially, and that he can sit outside as a creator, but he's also nature.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people think that, it's this, and I'm saying this very loosely as a metaphor, that God is this puppeteer in the sky that's controlling everything. It doesn't really. I don't think it works like that. I think God is nature, as you said. It's the very structure, it's the very software that's encoded into everything on this planet, has a level of control, which is why maybe the quantum physics experiments show that when it's observed, it changes behavior. Who knows? So yeah, I think nature is the ultimate equalizer, essentially, that we need to be more in tune with. And as you said, maybe that is why it's under attack from the system, possibly.
Yeah. I agree with 100%. I mean, God's within. If God is supreme, if the source of all creation is supreme, it means he is in everything that he's created, right? And one thing that people have a really hard time grasping because of religions, because of, the books over time, is that God lives within them as well. You're one with God. There's no difference between you and God. The only difference between God and you is that God knows he's within you. You don't know God's within you. That's the problem, because that's the consciousness issue. That's what we call enlightenment. That's what we call seeking, mukti on this planet. So essentially, whenever you hear someone, or David Icke actually, 1990s, goes on this broadcast with Wogan and says that, we're all gods internally. And he was laughed off the stage. He was totally laughed off the stage. And it's like, Jesus came here to teach us the same thing. The Buddha came here to teach us the same thing. Krishna came here to teach us the same thing. If you read all of these books, which I did, I loved reading the book. I mean, I grew up in a Catholic school. I took what I wanted from the Bible. I understood that it wasn't the supreme source of all creation and that it's been manipulated. Same with the Quran. Same with, I love to read books about Muhammad. I love to read books about the Buddha. I love to read books about Krishna, all of it. I love to study all of it. And if you actually take the time to study all of it, you realize they're all connected way beyond what you'd ever imagine. And they're all pointing at the same thing, is that the Supreme is within you. The Supreme is within all things. You are one with the Supreme. And if you wake up to that oneness with the Supreme, then that is the most highest bliss you could experience. So I think there's been a big push for the disconnection from nature, because if you connected with nature, you would be in tune with that. So well in tune with that. Your system, your energy, your chi, everything would be flowing properly. And then you'd be able to reach those higher dimensions of consciousness.
100%. And this is what's quite annoying, that all religions basically agree to the same thing, that there is a higher power that is good. And let's just take Abrahamic religions for an example. People who are Abrahamic religion, or believe in an Abrahamic religion, they're looking at the differences between the religions as opposed to the commonalities. So the Jews basically saying, look, we believe in God, but we don't believe Jesus was a prophet. Okay, perfect. The Christians believe, we believe all of that too, but we believe that Jesus was God. And then the Muslims are saying, hang on a minute, we believe that Jesus was a prophet, but he wasn't God. But Muhammad was also a guy. And it's basically three versions of the same story, and they're all arguing about it's basically an argument about Jesus, isn't it? Who's Jesus relative to the story? Is he no one? Is he God? Or is he someone but not the ultimate? Basically, and they're all arguing. I was like, mate, you've got so many more commonalities. You believe in the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, blah 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 blah. You believe in the flood stories. Whether we want to go down the rabbit hole of whether that's the same as the Mesopotamian stories, I don't know. But yeah, and this is kind of how consciousness seems to be at the minute. Is that let's look at our differences first, And then if we can find commonalities, perfect. It should be the other way around. Let's look at the commonalities, and then we can have a decent discussion about why we disagree on certain elements. But unfortunately, I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people are pessimistic about where the world is today. Because if people argue about stupid little things like that, and have fights and go to war over uh, basic ideological differences, then why can we work it out on a much wider scale? I think that's what people are thinking.
Yeah. So if we just draw parallel to what you just said, so you said people focus on the differences, right? When it comes to religion. When I went with my guru in India and my teacher in India for a while, he was explaining to me how the spiritual and the political worlds need to merge. Spiritual people can't be afraid of the political, and political people can't be afraid of the spiritual. They have to come together, which is, why I'm running for Congress, why I created the American Congress Party, but at the same time, why I'm a deeply spiritual person. And if we just draw a quick little parallel to politics, everybody focuses. There's two religions in the United States, it's left versus right. Okay. Everybody in the power positions makes you focus on the differences. They don't let you focus on the commonalities. I guarantee you, if we were to take a poll today, if for Americans, right? If we were to take a poll today for the government to stop poisoning all our food and our water, for at least maybe not for free healthcare, but for healthcare costs to be dramatically reduced, both privately and federally, right? Insurance costs, I guess you would say, healthcare costs, and for our education system to be improved and for our infrastructure to be improved, okay, at no extra cost to the American citizens, there would be a unanimous decision, right? It would be unanimous. Absolutely no destruction. But what they do is they'll have a bill. So in that bill, I just showed you those four things, right? In that bill, they'll add, oh, but you'll also have to be pro abortion. Oh, but you'll also have to be this. Oh, but you'll also have to be this. So they'll create that division. They'll add in those little micro things that are super emotionally charged topics, right? To destroy the actual logic and the actual unification of the people. So they do it with religion and they do it with politics. And you know what? Politics is a religion at this point. If you're a left winger, if you're a right winger, you are like a lot of people have become independents, which is what I am. I think most people in the United States are actually shifting towards becoming an independent, but it's a religion for these people. It really is. Their beliefs are so set in stone and they're so focused on the differences rather than the things that they have in common.
100%. And the problem is that actually politics seems to be more worried about control and economic performance than it is about real economic performance. I.e., if everyone is struggling financially, but the stock market's doing well, then you can't just judge it based on the stock market. You have to judge it based on actually what you're seeing out there in the real world. It's a strange one.
Well,
And
80% of, yeah,
go on.
80% of the stock market is owned by the top 20%. And then if you look at like 50% of the stock market, it's owned by the top 10%. So it's not a reflection of the American economy. It's a reflection of these, top people. So
Yeah, it's like the whole Elon Musk joke. Have you heard it? The economy, the two economists.
no, tell me.
So he says the two economists walking down the road, and one of them goes, "Oh, I'll pay you $100 to eat that shit." And he goes, "All right then," and he eats the shit. And then they carry on walking, and the guy who ate the shit goes to the other guy, "Oh, there's another piece of shit over there. I'll pay you £100 to eat the piece of shit." So he eats a piece of shit, and they keep walking. They go, "Fuck, we've not made any money. We've both eaten shit, but the stock market's made the GDP's made £200 or $200." And that is literally how it works. BP could spill oil off the coast of I can't remember off the coast of where, but that increased GDP because obviously the money traded hands. It doesn't make any sense. How can that be the sole measure of economic performance? And yes, of course, the debt to GDP ratio has gotten out of hand in Western countries at 100%. And just to put it into scale for those who aren't financially savvy, whatever your salary is, that's how much debt you would have, and it will be shit debt, credit card debt, not mortgage debt. It would be shit debt. So if you're earning
Yep.
$60,000 a year, you've got $60,000 on credit card. That just gives you an indication, really, of what we mean by GDP to debt ratio. For those who don't know, but that's not a good state to be in. And yes, of course, they're big economies, and they could absorb it. But the question is, if they could absorb it, why has the GDP to debt ratio increased so much over the last 50 years? That's the big question. Is it just wars, or is it inherent issues with the system itself?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that it is the banking system that we have in place that essentially keeps us suppressed. So there was like there's this really, really, really good story of my guru told me a long time ago, and it was of this king, okay, and he was the king of this, whatever kingdom, and these people were becoming extremely intelligent, and he was afraid that the people were going to be so intelligent they were going to realize there was no need for a king anymore. So he goes to some guru and he surrenders to this guru, and he just does I don't know the what would be puja, not puja. I don't know. He was just very humble before this other guru. And so after a while, this guru's like, all right, fine. Why did you come here? Like, what do you want from me? And so this king was like, hey, listen, I have this problem where back in my kingdom, my people are becoming so intelligent, their consciousness levels are becoming so high. I need a way to suppress them. I need to figure out a way to stay in power because I don't want to lose my kingship. And so this guru was like, all right, you're going to do three things. Okay. And these three things are you're going to open a pub on every corner. Okay. You're going to open up brothels. Okay. And you're going to have brothels everywhere. And then the third thing you're going to do is you're going to open up banks and make loans extremely easy to get. Extremely easy. And then over time, you're going to increase the cost on those loans. Okay. You're going to increase the interest rates, whatever. And so if we just zoom out on a macro scale and look at what's happening in the United States and in the Western countries, these are three massive problems. Three massive problems. You get the stress from the financial, from all the debt you're in, from picking up a loan that you really can't afford to have, or you're just constantly in this cycle of loans, right? So you turn to, a lot of people turn to the pornography, or they turn to alcohol, or they turn to drugs as a way of coping with this stress. And then as a result, your consciousness massively drops.
It seems like a two-edged sword, then, doesn't it? In that respect, it's attacks on both sides, both fronts, port side and starboard.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they want to own your consciousness. So yeah, it makes sense that they would cover they would cover all their bases.
Is there anything else in terms of what you've been researching lately that you think is really worth mentioning that we've maybe not covered? Because I think we have covered a lot of ground thus far, but maybe there's some gaps in there that maybe you want to fill.
Ooh, it's a great question. Give me 20 seconds here to really think about that. I think the most important takeaway from any of this, and like conspiracy, not conspiracy, whether you think this is true or not true, it doesn't matter. The most important thing is that you yourself as an individual are empowered. You have to realize just how incredible you are as a human being, and that whatever way you see the world is whatever you're going to see in the world. So if you see the world as this dark, grim place where the global agenda is going to take over and we stand no chance and there's nothing we can do and it's just the way it is, you are contributing to the problem, and you're contributing to your own unhappiness. We have to take every single day, one day at a time, and we have to shape the world the way we want to see the world, regardless of how powerful you think these people are that are in power, regardless of what you think about them. You're more powerful than them because you've withstood all of the vaccinations. You've withstood all of the poisons they put in the water, in the food, in the media, in the music. You're still waking up in spite of all of that. So if you want to see a better world, if you want to see a complete 180 of what's happening in our country, in around the world, then you need to start to picture the world you want to see. And I think it's important that we gather together. on political topics, but politically as an independent, we need to create a way for us to be able to get into these positions of power rather than just having the left versus right dominate everything. And we can't just separate being a spiritual being from being a political being. There has to be a marriage between the two because it's not evil to be a politician. It's evil to serve the overlords. That's evil, right? But just being a politician alone doesn't make you evil. Being spiritual alone doesn't make you enlightened. You have to be able to experience all things in life. And I think that if there's anything you should take away from today, it's that we're all incredibly powerful and we need to start using that power now in order to change the world for the better.
I love it, and you're absolutely right about the way that you see things. You see it more, and that's actually a real phenomenon called the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon. And if you don't know what we mean by that, think of the time where you were looking at a new car, or you're looking for a dog, or you just had a child. You notice those things everywhere. You want to know BMW, for example. You start seeing them everywhere because your mind is then accustomed to that. So we can use this for both sides to look at some of the issues with society and realize that actually it's deeper than you realize. But also on the flip side, to be optimistic, there are some good things out there, as you said, Brandon, to feast your eyes on, and actually we can be the change that we want to see in the world and all of that. So yeah, definitely there is optimism into how we can push this forward in a positive way. Definitely.
Agreed. Couldn't agree more.
Any final comments before we
Yeah.
call it a day?
Quick few shout outs. So I have my own political party, obviously the American Congress Party if you're in the US and you're listening, definitely come check us out at americancongressparty.com. But I also created my own social media platform called Amara Social. You can find us in the App Store, in the Google Play Store. And the reason being behind that is pretty obvious. I mean, I've been banned from enough platforms, or from TikTok at least enough times, and had posts deleted from other platforms enough times to know that they do have an agenda to suppress knowledge and information from being disseminated. So we wised up. We created our own social media platform. Again, it's called Amara Social, Amara. And would love to have you all on that platform with us.
I think that's a great idea because, as we were talking about just before we came on air, is that I uploaded a lot of shorts from my interview with Dr. Peter McCulloch, who is well known for COVID commentary, essentially. And they were fine on YouTube, they were fine on Instagram. But when it came to TikTok, 50% or 60, 70% of those were not allowed to be uploaded because they were against a narrative which is 4 years too late, basically. So I think it's great that you're, and as I said at the start, I think one of the great things about yourself is that you're not just talking about these things, you're actively doing it. Instead of saying, well, actually, freedom of speech platform, we need one. Okay, let's create one. Oh, we need political change. Okay, let's create one. So I think that's a real positive about the way that you're approaching things, as opposed to just being a commentator, if that makes sense. You're actively trying to make change, which I think is a great thing.
Super appreciative. Thank you for that. I get a lot of DMs with people saying, what are you doing? It's like, well, I am running for Congress in my state. I did create a political party. I am creating a social platform. So they very rarely reply to that DM whenever I send that back to them. So
That's the way to shut people down, isn't it?
yeah.
There we go. Well, thanks very much, Brandon. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm sure we could talk for a lot longer, actually, but we've both obviously got commitments and stuff. So,
Yeah,
but yeah, it's been
very
an absolute
grateful.
pleasure. Maybe we can do it again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on.